Been a little bit since I last posted, so I thought we'd start with the basics. And we're going to list 5 things that every noob should know, and even a couple of veterans miss sometimes. Welcome on the Deadwoodjedi. This is Raid Shadow Legends video. I know it's been a minute since I posted, but we'll talk about that some other time, like on stream or something. Today, what I want to do is give you a quick video, just a couple little tips and tricks that I notice happen a lot of times to beginning players and even a fair amount of veteran players that just don't know any better, or maybe they just don't care sometimes, including myself. That happens. But these are 5 big things, simple things that you can do to make your gameplay a little bit better, actually a lot better, just by paying attention to a couple things that maybe slipped your mind. I do want to, real quick, before we get into that, I do have to thank my sponsor for today's video. It's Into the AM. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now. I think you can see there's a spaceman falling on there. Absolutely love their clothing and highly recommend going and checking their website out, intotheam.com. They have just amazing stuff, and I have a code DWJ10, and if you use that, you can get 10% off, and there's actually a link down below, so I just use that if that's something that's interesting to you. But they have a wide range of kind of iconic wear shirts, and they also have other stuff too, sweatshirts, shorts, all sorts of kind of clothing items, but these are t-shirts that I love, and so I definitely recommend, if you are interested, give it a shot. The quality too, very high quality. They gave me a few of these shirts. It feels really good. It's very soft. I'm a big guy. It fits me really nicely, not too snug, not too loose. It's really good stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, go check that out. But what I wanted to get to today is I want to talk about these 5 things that every noob should know. And I'm gonna try and keep an order of importance, right? Reverse order of importance. And so let's go ahead and start with number 5. So number 5 on my list is rank and rarity. And what I mean about that, what I'm talking about is gear. I see all too often that players are ranking up and leveling up 3-star, 4-star, 2-star gear. And it's just because you don't know in the early on what's going to really carry you throughout the game. And so that just becomes a thing. It's what you have available. You're only hitting low level dungeons. And obviously this is definitely newbie kind of stuff, because at some point in this game, you're only going to be able to get 5- and 6-star gear. And what I tried to say is, as soon as you can, as soon as you're getting 5- and 6-star gear, and generally what that means is that generally means hitting level 20 or so on the dungeons, right? If you look at the dungeons levels here, when we go to normal, once you hit stage 19, right, the rewards, well, where can you see the rewards? Here we go. Stage 19, yeah. So you can see the rewards here. It's 4- to 6-star artifacts. Once you hit stage 20, it's 5- and 6-star. And so everything beyond that, stage 20 to 25, all the hard modes, that's all going to be 5- to 6-star artifacts. And as soon as you're getting that, you don't want to use any of the 4-star gear. And even before that, when you're starting to get a fair amount, like when you start hitting stage 17 or so, you're going to be getting 5- and 6-star gears in your drops. You're going to want to really start phasing out that 4-star gear, and definitely don't want to rank it up, level it up any higher than, say, level 12. But the other part is the rarity. One of the big tricks that people will tell you is go to campaign and farm stage 6 here with the boots in speed sets, because speed boots are 40 speed in a set that's an extra 12. It's very easy to do. You just farm that a bunch, because you can get some, even if it's common, as long as it's 5-star, that's what's going to matter. Because what the difference is the rarity of the piece does not impact the strength of the main attribute. Early on, it's really about the rank and not the rarity. So even common, uncommon pieces, as long as the main stat is what you want, that's what you want to get, and that's what you want to rank up. As long as it's like 5-star and above, you can rank it up to full level 16 without too much fear of it going out of style too quickly. Okay, number 4 on my list is crit rate and crit damage. And this is something that just gets really, I think, it's either overlooked or misunderstood a lot for fairly new players, right? The first thing is, you do want crit rate on anybody that you plan on doing damage. You want 100% crit rate, not 115%, 100%. So you can look here at total stats and it says 101% right there. If you look down here, it's that 86 plus the base 15, right? You want 100% crit rate on everybody that you plan on having do damage. Doesn't mean everybody needs 100% crit rate, but it does mean that your damage dealers 100% want that. At some point, though, you're going to want to change from what typically happens is people will wear crit rate gloves to get that 100%, right? That's kind of par for the course, I would say, right? Like I've got crit rate gloves right here on my Vault Keeper Wixwell, right? Crit rate's fine. It's going to get you that 100% crit rate. And if they're kind of like a decent damage dealer, but not your main damage dealer, that's fine, right? Gives you extra damage. They'll hit harder. It's definitely beneficial. But for someone that you're planning on absolutely destroying the enemy, like my Trunda here, what you're going to want to do eventually is get crit damage gloves. Like it's just, there's no way around it. At some point, that's the move you're going to want to make. But to do that, you'll have to get crit rate in the substats. And that can be a bit of a challenge. So definitely not something that we look to do right away. However, the one thing I will say is it gets underrated or overlooked is that you can build pretty high crit damage even with crit rate gloves if you get good crit damage substats. So you don't have to make that move right away, but that is one of the big changes when you start talking. People go, how do I make my nuker hit harder? My damage is just too low. One of the big ways to do that is start swapping your crit rate gloves for crit damage gloves. And I hear that a lot, right? And people just don't seem to know. The other thing I see a lot is crit damage gloves without the appropriate crit rate. You're not critting. If you don't have 100% crit rate, there's not really much of a need to go to crit damage gloves. Now, I'm sure there's a mathematical formula you can do where you go, if I get 75% crit rate, it's still going to be worth it. And that's probably about right. But for me, I always like the consistency of things. So I try to get that 100% crit rate and then put on as much crit damage as I possibly can. But understanding those mechanics, understanding like the difference between having good crit damage and not is absolutely massive as far as the damage you deal go. Let's talk about number 3 on my list, which is team composition. This is one of the biggest things I see all the time. And I talk about what I see. I do coaching services. So if it's something you're interested in, you can definitely sign up on my website. I'll basically talk you through half an hour of, things to do, answer your questions, try to point out issues where you're having in the game, try to fix some flaws that you might have, or just kind of go over some ideas of how to advance a little bit further. When it comes to this is the biggest thing that I see problems with. People are trying to do dungeons, they're trying to do clan boss, and the biggest issue is they have the wrong team built. They're using the wrong champions because they don't understand how the roles work in this game. Now, this is obviously an unkillable team here, right? And so what I'm doing is I have Demitha blocking all the damage from the boss. So I never have to worry about anything except getting my debuffs and doing damage out there. So I've got Turvold giving me weaken, I've got Fushan giving me decreased defense, and I've got Eris here giving me poisons. I have all the things I need for this team to be successful. All the damage stuff I'm getting from the different roles of the champions I'm in. That's one way to play clan boss. Another way to play clan boss, obviously, is to do something a little bit more traditional, right? Where you need to survive, where you're trying to stay alive, right? Ally protection, increased defense, shield, strengthen debuffs. Those are the types of things you start looking at. You start looking at the debuffs you need to bring, decrease attack, in addition to decreased defense and weaken and poisons and things like that. And understanding those things that you need is going to help you build your team, because now all of a sudden you have clearly defined roles for your champions. And that's really important. I think the biggest place that you're going to see this, and one of the reasons why it's such a hard, difficult team to build, is in Hydra. This is where it becomes extremely difficult, where you go, how do I fit in all the roles that I need? I mean, there's some things you have to have, like block, buffs, and provoke. There's something that you want, like decrease speed, decrease defense, weaken. Decreased defense might actually be on the must-have list, but there's all these different debuffs. And then on the other side, you got to have some survivability, right? With some form of healing or revival, right? You want Hex if you can get it out there as well. Not to mention things like increased defense, increased speed for your team. There's a lot of things that you need. And so it becomes this thing of, how do I fill all those roles for my team? Now, generally, when we talk about things like dungeons, we're talking more roles than we are definitely debuffs and buffs, right? It's kind of shorthand for it, I would say, because it's really what buffs and debuffs am I bringing? That's really what we need to know, right? But there's shorthand for it. So like I've got my damage dealers, right? I've got Acrizia, I've got Ganut here. Those are my two big damage dealers, right? So I'm building them as much crit rate and crit damage as I can. I've got my setup champions, right? Champions like Ugo, and I guess Ugo's really my big setup champion. A little bit Chris, but they both have decreased defense in their kit, is basically what I'm saying. So they're setting up my damage dealers to do more damage. And then, of course, I've got my protectors, right? You know, I don't know if this is like how I would call them, but like my protectors, right? So we've got, got Chris here with the ally protection ability. We've got Tiffy here with the block debuffs and the shields, and the block debuffs and the increased defense buffs, right? She's also an enabler. She's going to make everybody go faster, and she's also a healer reviver, right? So for me, when I build a team, I know there's kind of like 15 different roles in there. When I build a team, especially for like dungeons and stuff, wave kind of content here, Doom Tower type of work, what I'm basically looking to do is very simple, right? Now, this is going to be, this is obviously my speed team. But if I were just going to build a team, we'd be talking about, I need a damage dealer. Knut's great. I want a setup champion to make sure they do the damage. I think Lydia's really good for that. I do need someone to kind of protect my team, keep them alive, I think. And so for something like that, you want a reviver. You maybe want some protection of some sort. Actually, I think she's fantastic. Tuhana Rock's one of the best. She has automatic cleanse, which is great. She has healing, which is great. And a lot of good buffs, debuffs. Oftentimes, you want some form of control. So something like stun, like I have here with Ragash, is fantastic. That's definitely something I would maybe want to have. And then also the waves can be a little bit tough. So I could bring in somebody like Mashald as like a wave clearer, right? Knut's more a single target type of thing. And so this is the type of team I could run. I don't know if it would be 100% successful or at all successful, right? The one thing I don't have on this team is I don't have a reviver. That's important to know. I don't have a straight up healer. I have Leech, which provides healing, but not a straight up healer. And so these are, well, I guess I do. We have Tuhana Rock. So the big thing we don't have is a reviver. And so what that means is if anybody on this team dies, the run's probably going to be in trouble. So I either have to make sure that I'm strong enough or whatever to make sure that nobody dies. The idea, though, is when you're building your team, you need to fill those roles. You need someone to protect your team, right? That can include reviving, that can include healing, but you need somebody to kind of protect them. It can be buffs like ally protection, increased defense, but you have to stay alive. And so you need someone to ensure that. You need someone to control the enemy, right? Whether that's stuns, true fears. You can see I got Mashald and I've got Ragash. Both of those provide some hard CC abilities: stun, provoke, true fears, sleep. There's a bunch of them that will kind of lock the enemy down. You need something like that on your team. You want somebody to set it up, right? Whether we're talking about like a Lydia, even Ragash does it, but basically you want AoE decreased defense to allow your damage dealers to fully do the work. And then you need at least one damage dealer, right? So protection, setup, lockdown, damage. That's the general 4-man team. And you'll notice this is a 5-man team here for Dragon, which means I do have the ability to change it up a little bit. I could bring in a different champion if I so chose. I could bring in another damage dealer. I could bring in a speed specific champion or somebody that does just an aspect of those things a little differently. There's a lot of variety that I can then bring into it to make things a little bit different. But the general gist is that going to be that system, right? Someone to protect you, someone to set up the enemy, someone to lock down the enemy, and someone to do damage. Now, that lockdown is more like a control champion, right? Because you can do control a couple different ways. It can be with turn meter as well. Speed can kind of lock them down. It doesn't just have to be debuffs. But this is the basic gist of how you would want to build your team, right? And that works not only there, but it also works in Arena. You see it there a lot too. Where it's like, for me, I have my speed champion in Siffy. I have my lockdown here with Armand, and then my damage dealer over here. This is just kind of an extra champion. Honestly, for this team, not necessarily needed. Now, no guarantees I win on this, but you should be able to see here. Speed, there we go, lockdown, right? All those stuns are my lockdown. We got the speed of Siffy, lock them down. There we go. keep moving, and finish them off, right? And that's how it goes. Go right into the damage dealer and he kills them. I could have a setup champion in there. I'm strong enough where I don't have to, but that's typically when an early team you build, that's typically how it goes. So having that team composition, having that knowledge instead of just dumping your 5 strongest champions into a team is really, really important. And that's something that gets overlooked a lot, the actual building of a team. All right, number 2 on my list is speed. You might think team composition should be number 1, and good argument for that. These last 3 are all pretty interchangeable in my opinion, but speed is the one thing I see get overlooked a lot. One of my slowest champions on my team right now is my Candrafon. He's a 222. This is my damage, one of my damage dealers, one of my nukers. My Trunda that I use for Hydra is at 257 speed. Even my Rathalos here is at 236 speed. Not only do you have to be obviously fast for things like Hydra, but in general, you got to be fast, and it's only going to be beneficial. My White King Narcissus that I use in Arena, 227 speed. Speed is king. The faster you are, the more attacks you make, which means the more damage you do, which means the sooner you kill your enemy, which means the less attacks they take, and so hopefully you survive more. If you can add speed versus not adding speed, always add the speed. It's just a general rule of thumb. Now, obviously, there's certain situations, certain sets maybe where you don't want to do that. If you have a supreme protection champion like Ultimate Death Knight or Nekret the Great, for example, these are champions, or Usuga. She's one that I use a fair amount. Right? These are champions that are there just to protect you in things like Arena. And so you actually kind of generally will want to build them as slow as possible. So you'll put them in Stone Skin. The Stone Skin will last even longer, right? That's the idea. But outside of like those, I think those 3 specific champions, you just generally want to have more speed than that. I'm always aiming to have about 200 speed as kind of like a minimum. Now, early on in the game, right, when I'm still trying to get to stage 20 in dungeons on normal, I'm looking to stay above 175 is generally what I want. You know, between 170 and 190, those are speeds that are good for clan boss, for example, just to throw it out there. So I generally try to have all my champions in that range. Once I can beat stage 20 in dragons, that's where I'm like, okay, now we want to push higher. Now we want to try and get over 200 speed for the champions that we're using if we can, right? It doesn't change the fact that you still got to, you know, balance your team and have everything synced up as best you can, but you want to try and get that speed as high as possible. And I will see people so often, they will have their reviver with like 120 speed, their damage dealer at like 130, and it just doesn't make any sense because you can't heal your team if you're not taking any turns, right? And it's fine for campaign where the enemies are all super slow, but it does not work when you start going into other content, start going higher up in it. So speed is king. This is why you generally will be advised to always put speed boots on your champions. It's a good default position. When you can make 170, 190, 200 speed without speed boots, using attack boots, that's when you know you're at that next stage of the game. The very last thing is do everything. And this is kind of a catch-all thing, but this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see all the time, is someone will be focused on dungeons or they'll be focused on clan boss, but they'll skip Arena and just, I don't like it, I don't do it. And I get that, right? But you need to do everything. Now I'm going to show you my Great Hall here. You can see even I have not finished my Great Hall after 5 years of playing. And part of the reason why is I am much like many of you. I don't do the things I don't enjoy as much. Arena has never been something I thoroughly enjoy. So it becomes a bit of a struggle for me to do that. So what happens is I lag behind in the Great Hall. Problem is the Great Hall affects everywhere else in the game. I haven't been doing live arena. So what happens? I don't have my live arena bonuses. And what does that mean? I'm lagging behind in all the other areas of the game. When you want to do things like faction wars, this is one of the places that is super vital early on. I see so many people miss it. And the biggest problem is if I don't do faction wars, I don't get mats. If I don't get mats, I can't forge gear. Please forgive the obscene amount of gear that I have here on my main account. But perception gear is the best set in the game, especially for new players. getting accuracy and speed and good stats because you're forging it. Yeah, this is all wonderful stuff. If you don't use it, it goes to waste. Or if you don't get it, you can't use it, I think is the bigger point. And if you don't do faction wars, you don't get that stuff. If you don't get faction wars, you don't get glyphs. Everything kind of impacts each other. If you don't do dungeons, you don't get gear. If you don't do clan boss, you don't get shards. If you don't do Hydra, you don't get both gear and soul stones. All of these things are things that you need, and they all kind of interact with each other. It is really important to do everything. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do everything every day. I, for one, am notorious for skipping stuff. But it does mean that you can't fully neglect it, right? I'm not saying, maybe you don't care about your dailies every single day. You're a very casual player. You only want to do the things you want. Cool. I hear you. But do 5 arena battles. Do your faction wars. It doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to push it all the time. You can do the lazy stuff. One of the things I always say is faction wars is try to push a little bit harder. Every day, try to do a little bit more than you did the week before. Well, maybe you do it every other week, maybe every third week. You don't have to always push the envelope with these things, but you do need to do it. That's going to be really, really important. So again, do everything, just a little bit, try it all out, do a little bit here and there. You don't do it all the time, but the more consistent you are with it, the better the benefits you'll see. So I want to say thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring today's video. And I have to say, before we leave, 2 things. One, if you guys have any tips and tricks that I miss, please leave them down below. The gems are usually in the comments. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of them. So I really look forward to hearing you guys talk about them. And if you disagree with my ranking, that's totally fine too. Let me know about that. I would love to hear what you think is most important or biggest, newbie gaffes that you can make. The second thing is, of course, if you guys want some help like this, some coaching or something, you can always go to my website. We can help you with your account work, but also the biggest tip for every newbie, go to the website to find your clan boss team. So you get your clan boss team set up. That is the biggest thing that you can do. That actually gets neglected a lot, I think, early on in the game. And that is definitely a problem because that's the most important part of the game to complete. So definitely, that's number 1 with an asterisk and a big star. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you all stopping by. Until next we meet on the Deadwood Jedi.